If there were no gold plates, there is no Book of Mormon. And many times I like to remind Latter-day Saints of what they're doing. They have to add details to the story because at this point in my conversation with them, they're starting not to believe the story as it's been told either. There's a couple of subjects that are very important to giving authenticity to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. One is you have to have a first vision and I mean that by the way they teach it now. In other words, that God the Father, Jesus Christ, appeared to Joseph Smith, told him all the churches were wrong, and their professors were all corrupt. But the other one has to do with the Book of Mormon. And of course, the way the Book of Mormon comes about is very important. And I got this idea really from Sandra Tanner. Sandra Tanner has a set of lead replica plates. They are the same size that Joseph Smith gives us, which is 6 inches wide by 8 inches long and 6 inches deep. Hers are made of lead. Lead is lighter than gold. And why gold? Well, because that's what the angel who appeared to Joseph Smith claimed that the plates were made of. He did not say they were golden. He did not say they were an alloy. He said they were gold plates. Smith said that the plates were 6 inches by 8 inches by 6 inches deep. So by going with those two bits of information, what we've done here is we've replicated the size of the plates. Now, of course, I can't afford gold plates. That would be a few $1 million at today's rate. But I did have a sheet metal company make these for me. And what's fascinating about this is it gives the Latter-day Saint a very good illustration of what Joseph Smith must have gone through if the story is true. It gets the Latter-day Saint to really think through this. Is this story even feasible? Is it possible? And I maintain that it's not. How heavy would gold plates be if they in fact were made of the metal gold? Gold, very simply, is 1,204 pounds per cubic foot. Joseph Smith's measurements give us plates that are 1/6 of a cubic foot. In other words, 200 pounds, if the plates are made of gold. These, being made of sheet metal, are only 80 pounds, much lighter. But most people realize when they pick them up that it would be impossible to replicate the story that Joseph Smith gives us. Or I should say the story that Joseph Smith's mother gives us, because that's the story that Latter-day Saints go by, and that's the story that's in their official church manuals. Basically, the story is that Joseph Smith was told by the angel Moroni that there was a record of ancient inhabitants written on gold plates. And he is not allowed to go retrieve those gold plates for 4 years, but eventually he's allowed to go get them. He goes out to where the plates are allegedly buried in the ground in what Joseph Smith claims is a stone box. And he takes them out of the stone box and he puts them in a hollow log. I have no idea why he does this. It seems like they were pretty safe being where they were for all these hundreds of years, if they really existed. But he takes them out of the stone box and he puts them in a hollow log. He goes back later to retrieve them from the log, and now he's going to take them home. The home that he's speaking of is about 3 miles away, according to his mother's estimation in the story that she tells. So he goes, he gets the plates. According to the story, he wraps them in a shirt. One account says it was a linen frock. And he tucks them under his arm and he heads for home. He goes a certain distance and he jumps over a log, and there happens to be a man waiting there for him with a gun who hits Joseph Smith with the butt of this rifle, we assume. They get into a scuffle. Joseph Smith knocks the man down with such force that he's able to run away from this individual. He goes further on down the road and he's accosted a second time. Same thing. He gets into a scuffle, knocks the man down. He's able to run away. Well, he goes on a little ways further. I think this was the one where it was about a half mile later, according to his mother. Another man accosts Joseph Smith. Same thing. Gets into a scuffle, knocks the man down, and is able to run home. In this encounter, however, he dislocates his thumb. Now let's go back and let's recreate this story and see if it's even possible. First of all, Joseph Smith goes and grabs the plates out of the stone box. That means he's going to lift these plates below his body weight. He's going to have to do this with his arm, or maybe some kind of leverage, maybe a stick of some sort, but it's got to be a pretty hefty stick in order to do that. And he gets them out, he puts them in the hollow log, goes back, gets them later on, tucks them under his arm with one arm. He's carrying these plates.
200 pounds.
Well, if the plates were made of gold. And he's heading down. Now he gets into the scuffle. He's holding on to the plates, which makes me assume he's fighting off the attacker with one arm, and he's not dropping the plates. Remember, if these plates are made of the metal gold, they would be very soft, very dense, but very soft. Mm-hmm. If he were to drop these plates, you would think that if it landed on a corner, on the edges somehow, that whatever writing would have been around the edges would have been destroyed. Mm-hmm. So you wouldn't be able to retrieve that in order to translate it later on. Mm-hmm. But he knocks this guy down and he takes off. But there's another element to the story that needs to be inserted. When Joseph Smith was a young boy, he was sick. His leg was infected with some sort of disease. I'm not even sure what exactly it was. Mm-hmm. But the doctor performed this operation on him, and it caused Joseph Smith to walk with a limp for the rest of his life. Mm-hmm. So we have Joseph Smith carrying this weight, one arm, fighting off attackers, jumping over a log, running away with a limp, and his attackers are not able to catch him. This is starting to have a lot of problems, okay? In a court of law, any good attorney just going through some of these bullet points is going to show a jury, we're starting to run into some real serious problems here. Now, he just doesn't do this once. Mm-hmm. I can say, okay, let's say one time he's able to knock the attacker down in such a way the guy can't get up. Maybe he's dazed with some
sort. Or runs away in the dark. Maybe.
Could be that. And one time, I'll give you that. But he does this 3 times. He does it again, down the road some more, and even down the road, we have to clarify that. Joseph Smith claims that it seems like at the last minute, he decides to get off of the well-traveled road and go on a path of some sort. How did these 3 attackers know to get off the road themselves? How did they even know where Joseph Smith was going to be? The hiding place for these plates is supposed to be a secret, but yet these guys have stationed themselves somehow along this route that Joseph Smith takes that he didn't really even think he was going to take, perhaps till the last minute. But there they are. Another thing, why did they spread out? If you're 3 guys, and it seems like they're working together, because Joseph Smith did belong to this group of money diggers who had this kind of idea that they would share whenever anybody found anything. And Smith was not going to share the gold plates. And this is why we assume some of these guys were pretty upset and they were going to steal the plates. Well, why didn't they all just gang up on him at the first log? Mm-hmm. It would seem 3 to 1 carrying plates would certainly make for an easy target here. But no, they spread out. That doesn't seem to make sense either. But Joseph Smith does that. He eventually gets the plates to the Smith home, and then later on he will commence to translate them from the Reformed Egyptian into English. Just go ahead and give it a shot.
All right. Yeah.
So you have to ask yourself, Gary, first of all, could you tuck those underneath your arm for any amount of time?
Never.
And be able to not only walk for at least a distance of 3 miles, according to Joseph Smith's mother. I'll just let you carry those.
I'm trying to see
while we're doing the rest of the interview.
You can just carry this for. The idea of trying to lift this up, somehow grab it with one hand. So if someone wanted to try this at home, they could use like a cement bag from Home Depot, or even like a car battery from like AutoZone, go running down the aisles with it.
And remember, we're only talking about 80 pounds here.
Yeah, I'm about done.
You'd have to double it and do another half a stack if you were going to have gold plates. Now, here comes the excuses. Mm-hmm. Often what I'll hear is, well, Joseph Smith could do that because he was a buff farm boy. Mm-hmm. If I had a nickel for every time I've heard that phrase, I'd be doing quite well. I don't care if it was Arnold Schwarzenegger in his prime. He would not be able to recreate this account. And so when I explain to them that that doesn't sound even believable, that somebody could carry such weight, they'll say, well, don't you believe in miracles? Mm-hmm. Well, as a Christian, of course I believe in miracles. It's just that there's no miracle connected with this story. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is Joseph Smith never claimed he needed a miracle to carry the gold plates, either the first time or even later on when he's moving them around, when he's translating them at various places. He never says that. Emma Smith, who claimed that she used to move the plates around in the Smith home while being able to do her work, as she said. They were always covered up. She claimed she never saw them. She also said at one point that she was curious enough to run her fingers across the edges of the plates, and she said they made a metallic sound. Well, that would tell us right there that it couldn't have been gold, because gold wouldn't make a metallic sound. Again, gold is very soft. It's very dense. If anything, if you were able to do that, it would thump, if it even did that. Mm-hmm. So we're starting to get a lot of problems with this story. So getting them to lift these plates, they can see that they are very heavy. Now again, these are only 80 pounds. What you would have to do to recreate the weight of gold plates would be take these plates, double it, and add another half of plates. That would be 200 pounds. Mm-hmm. And there's just no way that you can do that. Now, getting back to that supernatural argument, the miracle argument. Mm-hmm. Surprisingly, one of the best arguments against the supernatural strength theory, in other words, that God had to intervene and give Joseph Smith enough strength to carry something so heavy, happens to be Mormon apologists themselves. I am not aware of any Latter-day Saint apologist who argues that Joseph Smith needed supernatural strength to carry the plates. And the reason we know this is because it's Mormon apologists who try very hard to figure out a way to get the weight of the plates down to a manageable level. So what they do in order to accomplish that, they must first change the metal content. They have to ignore what Moroni actually said about the plates being gold, and they have to come up with a much lighter alloy of some sort. The alloy of choice happens to be a Central American alloy known as tembaga, which is a mixture of gold and perhaps copper or even silver. So even tembaga doesn't help them out. It gets the weight down, but not substantially to where an individual can carry the plates with enough ease to do all the things that Joseph Smith obviously had to do. And what they do with the tembaga theory is that they don't replicate what you see here with tembaga plates. They have to put an air gap in between all the plates. Mm-hmm. The air gap that they turn to is 50%, a 50% air gap going through the plates. Now that starts another problem for the Latter-day Saint. Because remember, Joseph Smith only translated the top 2 inches. The top 2 inches give us what they call the Book of Mormon. Mm-hmm. The bottom 4 inches were sealed somehow. We're not sure exactly. Some artist renditions show a strap going across the plates. But we know that Joseph Smith only translated the top 2 inches, according to his testimony. If you put a 50% air gap in between the plates, your 2 inches now become 1 inch. Mm-hmm. Keep in mind, the original Book of Mormon was over 580 pages long. Paper pages with ink characters. Mm-hmm. Now we're about 1 inch worth of metal plates with engraven characters. And now you're starting to see this is starting to sound a little bit impossible, which it is. Now, I've heard some Mormons say, well, how do you know that one Reformed Egyptian character didn't equal a paragraph worth of words? That's not usually how language works. And if you can get a linguist that would buy into a theory like that, maybe we can sit down and talk. But that's not usually what happens in languages like this. So we find that while they may solve one problem, at least solve it somewhat, they originate another problem, and that is we don't have enough plates to give us the entire Book of Mormon. Mm-hmm. Even that, you would have to say that the 50% air gap goes through the entire 6 inches of plates. Mm-hmm. Well, you would think that even tembaga, because it does have an element of gold in it, is going to be soft enough that after a while, at least the bottom plates would start to compress and become pretty solid again. Maybe the top plates would have an air gap like that, but what about the bottom plates? Now, the Mormon Church knows this is a problem. They do know this, and here's how I know why. For a long time, the LDS Church, in their North Visitor Center, they had a display that featured the handlebar of some sort, and you would lift up on the handlebars, and it was like lifting the plates. I would ask the person that was manning this display, well, how heavy are the plates that I'm lifting at this point? And they would say 50 pounds. Well, that's the arbitrary number that Mormon metallurgist Reed Putnam came up with if the plates were made of tembaga with the least amount of gold content with a 50% air gap. He said it would probably weigh about 50 pounds. But what's interesting, the display that the church is using isn't made all of metal. It has some metal plates, but most of the content, I don't even know what it is. It looks like a brick that may have been wrapped in plaster of some sort. Why is that? I think it's because they know that if they were to make the plates all metal, the weight starts to go way up over 50 pounds. You start running into this problem. Mm-hmm. So they even have to deceive people with the display in their own visitor center. Let's go back to this manageable weight argument. And the reason why I use Mormon apologists as a good argument against the supernatural strength is because, first of all, they realized Smith never said that. His wife never said that. The 3 witnesses who allegedly hefted the plates, or the 8 witnesses who allegedly hefted the plates, they also never talk about supernatural strength being needed. So we're doing something that's, I guess you could say, is pretty natural. I wouldn't say normal, because this is certainly not a normal story. Mm-hmm. But when we start adding up all the details, it's really amazing. For a Latter-day Saint to come up, for instance, with the buff farm boy argument, they obviously see there's a problem here. You need someone who has a lot of strength. When that doesn't work, they bring up the supernatural strength argument. Well, what are they doing? They're adding details to the story that are not in the story. Mm-hmm. And many times I like to remind Latter-day Saints of what they're doing. They have to add details to the story because at this point in my conversation with them, they're starting not to believe the story as it's been told either, mm-hmm. which is fine. This is where I want them to go. So you can see that we would have a definite problem with this. Now, okay, there were 3 witnesses who claimed that they saw the plates. There were another 8 witnesses who claimed that they saw the plates. The problem with their testimony is when you read the testimony of the 3 witnesses, let's say, mm-hmm. it's very clear in the Documentary History of the Church, Volume 1, where this story is found, mm-hmm. that they saw them in a vision. Mm-hmm. They saw them in a vision. They were not seeing actual visible tangible plates. And another interesting thing is the testimony of their seeing these plates. Joseph Smith said, in order to see them, you're going to have to pray and you're going to have faith. So I like to ask Latter-day Saints, did you have to have faith to see my plates? Did you have to have prayer in order to see my plates? And they'll say no. And I'll say the reason why is mine are real. There's the difference. This is why I have a very difficult time believing that Joseph Smith even had gold plates. He obviously had something that was wrapped up and he carried around, but people were not allowed to see what was inside. Mm-hmm. Even the 8 witnesses who claimed to see the plates, there's controversy about how they saw the plates. Joseph Smith's father supposedly saw the plates, but it doesn't sound like he saw them tangibly. In other words, these men are seeing these plates, but they're seeing them with a spiritual eye of some sort. So when Mormons ask me, well, do you believe that these men actually saw the plates? I says, I think they saw something they may have thought were plates. I don't know how that happened, but I will tell you this. They did not see gold plates like you're seeing my sheet metal plates right here. They did not see that. What they saw and how they saw it, I can't explain. I was not there. But I know that this story is not possible.
With everything that we've talked about today, if the plates really were a fabrication and did not exist in the way that Joseph Smith claimed that they existed, why does that matter? What's the takeaway that our LDS friends should have from this?
I think that's a great question because I think first and foremost, it tells us a lot about the credibility of Joseph Smith and what type of a character he really was and what kind of character he had. If the plates were not, in fact, what the angel supposedly claimed them to be, a record of ancient inhabitants written on gold plates, then Joseph Smith is lying about this. It also means that whatever is on these gold plates is not really what should be in the Book of Mormon. If there were no gold plates, there is no Book of Mormon. And see, this is another problem that comes up because I've had many Latter-day Saints, well, forget about all this, Bill. Just pray about it. And they'll take me to Moroni 10:4. If you pray according to Moroni 10:4, then the Holy Ghost is going to bear witness that these plates are true. That argument, though, doesn't work if the plates never existed, because if the plates really didn't exist, there is no Moroni 10:4 to pray. There is no Moroni. So you can see how the dominoes start to fall rather quickly on this. And unfortunately, you can't just forget all the evidence and run right to the subjective. You have to take into account all the evidence that we do have based on the story that Joseph Smith's mother, which I assume was told to her by Joseph Smith himself, since she was not there when Smith was carrying the plates home from where he had hid them in the hollow log. So you take all these bits of evidence into account, and you start to see there's a huge problem. If there are no gold plates, it shows Joseph Smith obviously was a liar, not a true prophet of God. If this story is a huge part of the very existence of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, what does that say about its credibility? And this is why I think Mormon Apostle Jeffrey Holland was so sure of himself when he said that if this story about the gold plates is not as it was told by Joseph Smith, then the church can't be true. I think he's absolutely correct.
Yeah. So if the LDS Church is not reliable and Joseph Smith is not a true prophet, then what is reliable? What is the truth that we can rely upon?
Well, I think one of the evidences that I like to use in trying to convince a Latter-day Saint of the truth claims of Christianity is the Bible. The Bible speaks of real people, real places, and real events. This can be verified with evidence. Can we prove the spiritual story behind the Bible? No, we can't do that. But we can verify a lot of the things that are described in the Bible about people groups that really did exist, places that we can go and see the remains of in ruins to this very day. These are some of the things that tell us that the Bible, as ancient as it is giving us a reliable account. Now again, I cannot prove the spiritual message of the Bible any more than a Latter-day Saint can prove the spiritual message they think the Book of Mormon has for them. But at least we can find things that verify the account in the Bible. We cannot have that same kind of luxury when it comes to the Book of Mormon.
So a questioning LDS person who's heard this and is wondering, wow, this makes sense. Yeah, I don't know what to believe now, but I believe in Jesus Christ. What is the true gospel of Jesus Christ? What is it that they should put their faith in, if not in Joseph Smith and the LDS Church?
That's a great question. They need to know that the Jesus of the New Testament actually lived in a real body. He died, he really died, and he was physically raised again. He was raised for our justification. And the Bible tells us that when we put our faith in what Jesus did on the cross at Calvary, his righteousness is imputed to us or added to our account. We are therefore justified or made right in the eyes of God. Now, a lot of Mormons assume that as evangelical Christians, we always stop there. Well, we shouldn't. We go from justification to sanctification. Now we want to live a life that gives honor and glory to the one who saved us. And it doesn't get us any more saved because we're never going to be perfect at that sanctification. Even our best works are tainted by our fallenness. But I would recommend to a Latter-day Saint, if they really claim that they believe in Jesus, that they turn their attention to the Jesus of the New Testament. Set aside the Jesus of Mormonism and read the New Testament as if you have no other beliefs whatsoever. I know that's difficult because we all have our biases, but that's one of the best bits of advice that I could possibly give an individual is to read the New Testament for what it actually says. And if you do that, I can't guarantee the outcome. I wouldn't guarantee the outcome, but I do know from experience that a lot of Latter-day Saints who did just that came to find the Jesus of the New Testament was not the Jesus of Mormonism. They put their trust in that Jesus and now they have that assurance that their sins are forgiven.
All right, well, thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the presentation we offered for you today. We encourage you to please do it as our friend Bill suggested. Read the New Testament and find out who Jesus is in the words of Scripture. And please like and subscribe and leave any comments or questions you have below. And thank you for watching.